We used artificial intelligence to debate a topic that could redefine our economic future: universal basic income. Two AI specialists are here to try to convince you of their beliefs. The pro side will argue for the benefit. The anti-side will present the fundamental flaws. Their entire debate will be tracked and scored by 5 independent AI models from 1 to 10. The final score will show which side is the superior one. Let the debate begin.
Universal basic income isn't a utopian fantasy. It's a structural fix for a system that no longer guarantees stability. Millions of full-time workers live below the poverty line, while automation erodes wages and security. A UBI gives every citizen a foundation to stand on, money that covers essentials but doesn't remove the need for ambition. When people aren't terrified of losing everything, they make smarter, braver choices. Learning new skills, starting small businesses, or contributing through caregiving and creativity. Evidence from Finland's pilot showed higher happiness, lower stress, and unchanged employment rates. Kenya's long-term UBI trial revealed stronger communities and better school attendance. Far from collapsing productivity, security liberated energy. Desperation fuels survival, but not innovation. A healthy economy needs both risk and resilience. UBI provides that balance. It's not paying people to do nothing, it's trusting them to build something once they're no longer drowning.
Each argument in this debate is evaluated by 5 independent AI judges. Every judge scores from 1 to 10, focusing on logic, ethics, economics, feasibility, and public opinion. Let's see how they scored the pros' first argument.
It's easy to imagine a world where people work out of passion once their bills are paid, but economics doesn't bend to optimism. A universal income detaches money from value creation. The result is predictable. Fewer people work, output falls, and inflation devours the very stipend meant to help them. Governments can't conjure resources. They must tax, borrow, or print. Each option weakens the productive core of society. Look at existing welfare systems already bloated and unsustainable. Multiply that by the entire population and you have fiscal disaster. Human nature responds to incentives. When comfort is guaranteed, effort declines. The social contract depends on contribution. Break that link, and you trade empowerment for dependency. UBI risks creating not a nation of innovators, but a culture quietly waiting for deposits to hit. That's not progress, it's slow decay disguised as compassion.
If you're enjoying this AI debate, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments, do you believe universal basic income would fix society or destroy it? Now let's get back to the video.
The anti-side mistakes fear for motivation. People don't stop contributing. When secure, they start contributing better. UBI doesn't pay luxury. It funds stability. Most recipients will still seek meaningful work because identity, status, and self-worth come from creation, not consumption. The difference is choice. Imagine an artist able to focus full-time, a parent finally able to care for their child, or a worker retraining for an emerging industry. Today's welfare traps people in poverty because earning more often means losing benefits. UBI removes that punishment and replaces bureaucracy with dignity. It also acts as an automatic stabilizer in downturns. When crises hit, spending power remains steady, cushioning small businesses and local economies. Far from undermining capitalism, UBI modernizes it for the post-automation era. We once introduced public education and social security under the same cries of ruin, yet they became pillars of prosperity. History doesn't repeat panic, it repeats progress.
Automation has disrupted work before, and every time, humanity adapted through innovation, not handouts. The Industrial Revolution forced change, but it also created vast new industries. Instead of offering unconditional money, society should invest in retraining and entrepreneurship. UBI teaches people to look to the state, not themselves. When every need is met automatically, risk-taking declines. You call it freedom, but it's an illusion of comfort funded by others' productivity. The top 10% already shoulder most taxes. Forcing them higher will drive capital abroad. Inflation will erode savings, punishing workers who still choose to strive. Over time, UBI normalizes stagnation, especially among youth who grow up expecting guaranteed income before contributing. Civilization advances when individuals are hungry for better literally and figuratively. Remove that hunger, and progress slows to a crawl.
The anti-argument paints UBI as an economic apocalypse, but scarcity itself is changing. The next great crisis isn't laziness, it's technological unemployment. Self-driving trucks, AI assistants, and robotic factories will displace millions faster than markets can retrain them. Telling people to adapt won't help when entire sectors vanish overnight. UBI provides a buffer for transition, preventing mass poverty and unrest. It's not permanent idleness. It's a bridge toward a new kind of economy, where human creativity and service replace repetitive labor. By guaranteeing a minimal income, we preserve consumer demand, the heartbeat of capitalism. Every dollar spent on basic needs circulates back into businesses. Economically, it's stimulus built into daily life. Ethically, it declares that no citizen should live in fear of starvation in an age of abundance. Society doesn't crumble when people are secure, it crumbles when they're desperate.
Security without responsibility sounds humane until it hollows out the values that hold society together. Work is more than a paycheck, it's contribution, discipline, and pride. When you universalize income, you universalize entitlement. Over time, productivity becomes someone else's job. The psychological cost is real. Communities lose purpose when effort and reward disconnect. Countries that experimented with high unconditional benefits, like some Northern European welfare states, are already scaling back due to cost and dependency. A global UBI would multiply those problems exponentially. Inflation, tax hikes, and shrinking labor participation are not theories, they're mathematical certainties. Economies thrive on exchange, not entitlement. Once citizens expect the state to sustain them indefinitely, political populism takes over, promising more with less foundation to fund it. That's not compassion, that's collapse disguised as equality.
The cost of UBI sounds terrifying until you realize how much we already spend managing poverty inefficiently. Welfare programs, unemployment insurance, housing aid, and endless bureaucracy consume billions in administrative overhead while trapping recipients in red tape. A universal payment would replace dozens of overlapping systems with a single streamlined mechanism. The funds aren't wasted, they flow directly into local economies as people buy food, pay rent, and support small businesses. Every dollar re-enters circulation, generating tax revenue in return. Studies from UBI-style experiments, like Alaska's permanent fund dividend, show no long-term inflation spike and continued workforce participation. UBI's scale may be ambitious, but so were public education and healthcare once. A nation that can print trillions for bailouts or defense spending can afford to secure its citizens. The real question isn't, can we pay for it? But can we afford not to? Because instability, homelessness, and crime cost far more than prevention.
This argument rests on wishful arithmetic. The U.S., for instance, would need over $3 trillion per year to fund even a modest UBI. That's nearly the size of the entire federal budget. You can't streamline your way out of that. Replacing welfare systems might save a few $100 billion pocket change compared to the trillions required. Printing money devalues savings, taxing the rich drives capital overseas, and borrowing explodes national debt. There's no free lunch. Someone must pay. The Alaska dividend is often cited, but it's funded by oil revenue, a unique, finite resource, not a scalable model. In large economies, UBI would trigger inflation that outpaces the benefit, making the check meaningless within years. And when prices rise, governments will face pressure to increase payments again, fueling a vicious cycle. The math doesn't lie. Perpetual income without corresponding productivity is economic suicide.
UBI isn't about creating money from nothing, it's about redirecting value more intelligently. Automation and AI are concentrating wealth in the hands of a few corporations that rely on publicly funded infrastructure, research, and labor. UBI reclaims a fraction of that wealth and redistributes it to the people who made it possible in the first place. Think of it as a social dividend on technological progress. As machines take over repetitive labor, productivity soars while wages stagnate. Without redistribution, inequality widens until economies collapse under their own imbalance. UBI is the stabilizer that keeps capitalism from devouring itself. And inflation fears are often overstated. New money only causes inflation if supply can't meet demand. But with global overproduction and underconsumption, a modest increase in purchasing power actually balances markets. UBI doesn't destroy the economy, it modernizes it for an era where work and wealth are no longer evenly linked.
This social dividend argument assumes endless growth and rational policy two fantasies history rarely provides. Redistribution always sounds fair until it guts productivity and investment. When profits are endlessly siphoned off to fund handouts, entrepreneurs stop innovating and investors move their capital to safer havens. The idea that automation will create infinite surplus ignores real-world bottlenecks like raw materials, energy costs, and logistics. Demand doesn't create supply magically, it creates shortages. That's what drives inflation, and the notion of reclaiming wealth assumes the state has a moral right to confiscate value simply because technology changed the labor market. But innovation itself depends on risk-taking and reward. Undermine that, and progress slows. UBI transforms the economy from a system of creation into one of consumption. It feels fair at first, but fairness without productivity is a short path to ruin.
UBI critics fixate on cost, but ignore cost savings. Poverty drains trillions through healthcare, policing, incarceration, and lost productivity. A guaranteed income drastically reduces those hidden expenses. Studies show that even modest cash transfers cut crime rates, improve health, and reduce emergency care costs. Every healthy, stable citizen is cheaper to support and more able to contribute. That's not just social progress, it's economic efficiency. Funding UBI isn't about printing endless money, it's about reprioritizing spending. Instead of subsidizing corporations or maintaining bloated tax loopholes, we invest directly in people, the real economy. It's the same logic behind a stimulus check, but permanent and predictable. Economies thrive when demand is steady and citizens feel secure enough to spend. UBI isn't charity, it's infrastructure for human potential, ensuring that every person, not just the top fraction, can participate in prosperity.
That logic assumes human potential translates automatically into productivity. It doesn't. Handouts can reduce stress temporarily, but dull initiative over time. Once a government establishes unconditional income, it becomes politically impossible to scale back, even when inflation bites or deficits balloon. The program grows, costs multiply, and debt spirals. Meanwhile, inflation quietly erases purchasing power, punishing the very poor it was meant to protect. Governments respond by raising UBI payments again, fueling the same inflation they caused. It's economic whack-a-mole. And while supporters claim it will replace welfare, in practice, no politician will dare cut existing benefits, meaning UBI simply adds another expensive layer. You can't spend your way to equality. True progress demands opportunity, not dependency, and UBI, however noble in theory, trades independence for comfort and prosperity for illusion.
The future of work will not be defined by the number of hours people clock in, but by the quality and creativity of their contributions. Universal basic income acknowledges that reality. Machines are rapidly overtaking not only physical labor but also cognitive tasks, writing, coding, analysis, logistics. When technology can perform most work more efficiently than humans, tying survival to a job becomes obsolete. UBI offers a humane transition. People can redefine purpose beyond employment, volunteering, education, art, caregiving, and community building. These contributions may not fit traditional economic metrics but enrich society immeasurably. By separating survival from employment, UBI doesn't destroy ambition, it redefines it. Humanity's greatest leaps, science, philosophy, innovation, have always come from those free to think without the constant pressure of survival. A society that guarantees stability creates space for its citizens to explore what truly makes them human.
That vision sounds noble, but it underestimates how deeply work shapes identity and community. Remove the necessity of labor, and you remove the structure that gives life meaning. Not everyone becomes a philosopher or artist when freed from economic pressure. Many simply drift. Societies thrive on shared effort and accountability. UBI risks dissolving that social fabric, replacing mutual responsibility with individual entitlement. Humans don't just need income, they need purpose. When the state guarantees survival, citizens stop relying on each other. Neighborhoods that once bonded through labor and cooperation become atomized, disconnected. The collapse may not be immediate, but it's cultural and psychological. Generations growing up without urgency, direction, or drive. We were not built to be idle beneficiaries. We were built to strive. Without that struggle, civilization doesn't evolve, it stagnates.
Purpose doesn't vanish when the paycheck does. It evolves. People already volunteer, raise children, and create art for no financial reward. Those are acts of meaning, not transactions. UBI simply gives more people the ability to choose purpose over obligation. In a world where corporations replace workers with automation to maximize profit, it's absurd to cling to the 20th century idea that worth equals wage. The coming generations are not lazy, they're adaptable. They'll design new systems of contribution, from local cooperatives to open source innovation, where success is measured by impact, not paycheck. And let's be clear, the alternative isn't noble struggle, it's chaos. Without UBI, mass unemployment will fuel instability, crime, and extremism. If work no longer defines the future, then UBI ensures the future still defines us. It turns the end of traditional labor into the beginning of creative civilization.
You assume that human motivation naturally fills the void, but history tells another story. When comfort becomes guaranteed, complacency sets in. The Soviet welfare model once promised the same freedom from economic fear and ended in apathy and collapse. Incentive drives innovation. Remove it, and mediocrity becomes the norm. A permanent UBI would eventually erode the link between effort and reward to such an extent that even essential professions, teachers, farmers, nurses, would struggle to recruit. Why endure hard work when an easy life is already paid for? That imbalance creates a shrinking pool of producers, supporting an ever-growing pool of consumers. Over time, resentment grows, productivity falls, and society fractures into those who pay for the system and those who live off it. That is not evolution, it's regression under the guise of equality.
The fear that UBI makes people lazy comes from assuming humanity's worst instincts will always dominate. But evidence says otherwise. In pilot studies, people didn't quit work, they shifted toward more meaningful roles. Crime rates dropped, health improved, and entrepreneurship increased. When basic survival isn't threatened, collaboration replaces competition. UBI won't make everyone a genius, but it will remove the constant anxiety that paralyzes billions. And when fear disappears, creativity flourishes. Even essential professions will benefit. Teachers who aren't underpaid, nurses who can reduce hours without financial ruin, innovators who can afford to fail once before succeeding. Civilization doesn't collapse when people are free, it expands. The destruction we should fear isn't from UBI, it's from clinging to an outdated system that punishes people for existing in an age of abundance.
The problem isn't human potential, it's human nature. Not everyone will use UBI to start companies or write novels. Many will settle for comfort, and over generations, that complacency becomes culture. Productivity declines slowly at first, then sharply as work loses social prestige. The few who still strive will resent supporting those who don't. Division deepens. Taxpayers against recipients, workers against dreamers. The system meant to unify ends up polarizing. And when inflation erodes purchasing power, political chaos follows populists, promising higher payments, opponents demanding cuts. Society becomes addicted to a benefit it can no longer afford, trapped between revolt and bankruptcy. UBI doesn't destroy society overnight, it does so gradually, by dulling ambition until there's nothing left to rebuild.
UBI is not a fantasy of effortless wealth. It's a practical response to a changing world. Technology will continue to eliminate jobs faster than economies can invent new ones. Ignoring that reality is denial, not discipline. UBI is how we adapt, how we ensure progress doesn't leave people behind. It provides a stable base from which anyone, regardless of birth or circumstance, can build a life of meaning. Far from destroying society, it strengthens it by restoring faith that everyone matters. If survival becomes unconditional, then the pursuit of excellence can finally become unconditional too. Driven not by fear, but by choice. Civilization's next chapter won't be written by those who cling to scarcity. It will be led by those brave enough to share abundance.
UBI promises freedom but delivers dependence. It replaces opportunity with entitlement, responsibility with comfort, and innovation with inertia. History's greatest leaps came from necessity, the hunger to improve, to survive, to overcome. Remove that hunger, and humanity loses its edge. The more comfortable a society becomes, the more fragile it grows. With UBI, every economic shock will be amplified by cost, every political shift will turn payments into weapons of populism. No system can survive when productivity falls and entitlement rises. UBI doesn't modernize capitalism, it mutates it into permanent dependency. What begins as compassion ends as collapse, because the moment the state becomes both employer and provider, freedom ceases to exist.
The pro side has won with 82 points. If you enjoyed this debate, subscribe and check out our other debate to find out if Islam is a religion of peace.